Welcome to Redacted Opinions, unfiltered, raw, and authentic. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts alone. And now, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to Redacted Opinions. I'm Luciano Sidoni. With me is Brian Clayman, my co-host and wingman on the new podcast, Redacted Opinions. We're new, we're fresh, and we're looking to expand into new horizons in terms of content and discussion. And today I think it's going to be a good one. It's going to be a hot button, I think, certainly for Canada and a lot of other Western countries in the world. I'm going to say hello to my good friend, Mr. Clayman. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very good. It's nice to be back. Our last episode was a lot of fun, but I did notice that when we agreed that you would do the post-production, the editing, and all this type of stuff, every time I was trying to express a redacted opinion, I somehow got cut off and went to you. So I'm going to be watching this week's because the content, it's important that we get these redacted opinions.
This is when you use a high quality AI. It knows how to eliminate all the noise in the background and just focus in on the content, the quality content. If it happens to be me, then that's not my fault. That's just AI.
But the AI is interesting because I would be going somewhere to say why you're wrong, and just when I got to the point, it cut it off.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
We're talking about other things.
It knows.
Okay.
All right. Anything you want to talk about before we get into today's topic on immigration?
Lots going on. I think the immigration system is broken. I think we see it every day in all sorts of different forms. But other than that, I think Donald Trump's doing a great job. Over to you.
Oh, wow. I'm going to cut this out and post it. Actually, I think
By
it's
the way,
timely.
Insert humor here, by the way.
I think it's timely because we are going to talk about immigration, obviously. And I think that's what we're going to talk about on this episode is distinguishing between what the immigration system is supposed to do, because I don't think anybody who has a logical mind on growth in a country would say that immigration is not needed. Both of us are immigrants. Our parents came from far off lands to start a new life here, and we're the product of that. Whether they're proud of it is another discussion, but they did come here. And so immigration is part of the Canadian, or whatever you want to call that, but it is part of our history. I think it needs to be part of our future. But I think somehow, some way, we've certainly lost our way. And I think that's what you want to get into this morning or this afternoon.
Yeah. Listen, Canada is a country of immigrants. My wife is Irish. My mother was Hungarian. My father was born in Canada, in Montreal. His father came from the Ukraine. So we're all immigrants except the First Nations people. That's reality. I think, though, what's happened, especially in the last little while, and it probably corresponds with the Trudeau years, is we always had immigrants.
Which Trudeau are you talking about? You have to be more specific. We've had two of those gracious leaders.
I like the first one. I'll talk about the offspring, the second one. But I think what has to, like an artist will mix their paint and they put a little bit of white in with the yellow and the black to get the color they want. They get it so that it absorbs to get what they're looking for. We used to do that with our immigration. My daughters, which graduated, the president of the university had a little bit of a speech. She was from Jamaica, and she said when she and her husband came to this country 40 years ago, they came for a better life. Part two, we also came to help make Canada's better. And somehow it seems that has changed. People may be coming for the better life, but they're not coming to contribute to Canada. And I think what's happened is we've planted seeds over the last 10 years. We've dropped our eye on the way we bring immigrants into this country. Who do we need?
I think the other part of that equation, you're talking about the people we're letting in. Our system was one of the best in the world, right? It was recognized as being premier. It was points based. You got in here as long as you hit the marks. And to your point, you came here to do something, to give back to Canada. You didn't bring your baggage from where you came from. But I think the other part that we're missing here that people, I don't think, get enough media coverage is the fact that not only did they blow the doors off of the immigration policy by bringing hundreds of thousands more than the country could absorb, but exactly on that point, they didn't reinvest in infrastructure, travel, transit, housing, all those things that all of a sudden we're in short supply. And today we're suffering the ramifications of that. Our children's children are going to suffer the ramifications of that because they may never be able to buy a friggin' house thanks to that poor planning and short-sightedness on the government for whatever reason. But it did not work. It was a total failure, in my opinion. And we are going to be suffering the ramifications of that for years to come, decades to come. Absolutely.
Yeah. Listen, I think part of the problem is that people don't understand, certainly the government doesn't understand, what is the difference between an immigrant and a refugee. An immigrant is someone that a country brings to the country because we need them in this country. We need their skill set. We need what they bring. We need their value set. That's an immigrant. A refugee is someone fleeing oppression, okay? My mother came to this country as a refugee from World War II. She needed help. Most Europeans, it was a disaster, and Canada offered her refuge. But doesn't mean that you have to bring everyone that applies. Even refugees have to meet a certain standard. And I think what's happened is the differentiation between being an immigrant and refugee has disappeared. We're just bringing people in, and we're bringing them in a quantities that we can't absorb. It's interesting, we were a melting pot. Melting pot means you bring a lot of different people in, a little bit at a time, and they'll contribute, okay, to the country, make the country work, make Canada an exciting place, very flavorful, different cultures. We haven't been doing that. The immigrants seem to be from just particular groups of people, and there's nothing wrong with that, but at the exclusion of everything else. It's important that the people we bring into this country as immigrants are people that are going to bring value to the country. And it's important that people that we bring in as refugees are people that are not a threat to the security of Canada. If they are, it's not our obligation to bring them in.
Yeah, I don't understand where this perception is that Canada needs to save the world. Our sustainability programs are off the charts. Nobody else is following them, including those people who signed on to all those treaties. They've thrown them out the window a long time ago. Canada's the only one that continues to drive down the green programs down everybody's throat to the cost of the country and all our industry that's suffering from it. And so, by the same token, what's the obsession with having to save the world when it comes to immigration? We cannot save everyone who's coming from a bad country. That doesn't make sense.
Listen, it would be nice if we could save the world, but at what expense? Okay, so if we start with the premise that I think the Liberal government, certainly under Justin Trudeau, wanted to save the world, that's a noble thing. We want people to live in freedom and safety and have jobs and food to eat. Nothing wrong with that, but not at the expense of losing or destroying our country. And that's where we lost sight. And the other thing I want to say about a refugee again, a refugee is someone, if you look at the UN definition, is fleeing imminent harm. Okay. A lot of the people, I do not understand how someone comes, let's say, from South Asian country as a foreign student, 2 years is going to a make-believe school in Canada, and when the 2 years is up, now they're a refugee. You can't be, by definition, a refugee because you're not fleeing anything. You came to Canada as a student. If you were a refugee, you should have come to Canada as a refugee, and it would have been adjudicated that way. It is a mess. It's a shambles.
And they use our own legislation and laws against us. They use our slow and due diligence process to stick around after they've been told to leave. If they're going to appeal, they get to stay until they file that appeal on our dime, on our cost. It's ridiculous. Okay. To your point, if you're an immigrant, there's a standard. You got to hit whatever it is, the points, the definition, the work that they're looking for, and you get in. And you get in because you want to be part of Canada. Nothing else. You're happy to keep your culture just like I've kept mine, but it's at home. I don't run my Italian flag in my office, right? That to me is just unacceptable for anybody. You come here, you love the country, that's what should be first in your heart. The refugee argument, to your point, is a totally different one because that's been used and abused on another level. We're lucky we're not Europeans. And look at what's going on over there because they're just literally a boat ride away from the North African coast and they just keep coming like waves. We thankfully have two oceans on either side of us. Otherwise, who knows what this government would have been doing in terms of welcoming those people. And again, I say those people, not because they're those people. It's just they are a different definition of what's needed in this country, and they need to hit their own benchmark. To your point, they're not doing it.
You talked about the problem with the system whereby people that are ruled inadmissible to Canada, then they appeal it and they play the system. Listen, I think it's important to say that none of us are against due process.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger issue is how do we get ourselves into this mess? How are there so many people now that are in the system appealing orders to be sent out, extradited out of the country? How did this happen? We are flooded. It has broken down our system. So I think we've got to clear that up. But then we've got to figure out how do we not lock the door? Because this country can't operate without immigrants, okay? But how do we control the door? How do we have a controlled flow? Because we certainly don't right now.
No, I don't have a secret. I don't have a solution that's going to solve it all tomorrow. I think we need to, first of all, shut the door, reassess, look inside ourselves, and redefine what it is to be part of this country. All we're talking about has had zero effect on this government. Because when you look at what they're doing, it just doesn't make sense. So we have youth, for example, running at 17, 18% record unemployment rates, right? For the youth. Why do we still have foreign workers in this country? And the argument about our youth don't want to work, that's a bunch of BS. The media's flooded that shit out there for people to consume and believe. And it's false. Because most of the young kids I know, they work their asses off. They just they can't find an opportunity.
Well, one of the problems when you have uncontrolled immigration, it's not targeted properly. Because I don't agree we have to shut the door. But one of the realities is that in a democracy, you've got to get elected. And you can't do good things if that's what you want to do if you don't get elected. But you can't get elected if you can't get your constituents to vote for you. And if you have communities which the dynamic of the community has changed so much that the Canadian values, okay, are no longer necessarily the values of the community, the politicians then have to decide either I get elected and I have to look the other way and then try to fix it from within, or I take a stand, okay, and say, look, I disagree with what this community that I represent is saying. It's not Canadian values, it's not right, but then you don't get elected. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I disagree with you also that we've got to shut the door, but we've got to do a couple of things. We've got to at least control the door. We've got to put a doorman at the door.
Yeah.
You and I know, we talk with friends in national security, national intelligence, and CSIS and RCMP. The problem is not that we're not vetting people. The problem is that government that gets these reports choose not to listen to the vetting because they have a political end that they're trying to meet.
I don't mean shut the door, don't let anybody in, but you need to shut the door and reassess what the hell we're doing. Okay. When the government says there's no such thing as a Canadian identity, then who are we letting in, man? Where's your benchmark? What are you guiding them against? What are you measuring them against? Our government, our federal government said that.
No, I agree. Again, I don't want to bash Trudeau. Maybe I do. I'm lying about that. But when you look at the things that the passport changed, and things like maple leaves, bounties around the passport, okay, because it offended some people. I don't give a rat's ass that it offended some people. These are Canadian values. What makes us different than Americans? What makes us different than Brits and Yugoslavians and Italians? It's the things that are our values. And when you get Trudeau said, we're going to be the first, national country, or what was the term?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Post-nationalist. Post-nationalist. Yeah.
What the hell does that mean? If you lose your identity, like, you're a proud Italian, okay? There's people that are proud of their heritage. They're proud to be Canadians. They're Jewish Canadians, Italian Canadians, Greek Canadians, okay? They're proud of their heritage. But if you take away what it means to be a Canadian, then what are you?
Yeah, exactly.
You're a group of dysfunctioning society. It doesn't work. And if you look at the things that are happening, let's move a little bit from the rant now to the reality, the criminality that's occurring, the tow truck wars, the extortion with certain communities, the recent arrests. Like Peel Region and your region just announced a whole bunch of arrests on organized retail crime, things of that nature. And many of these people were people that were here as foreign students and their visas expired and they're doing crime and we do nothing about it. Like, how do we find ourselves in this situation? My daughter is just finishing up a master's. She's gone to school for the last 5 years to learn something. She's not going to be doing break-ins or extortions afterwards. Like, right there, we have to look in the mirror and say, what are we doing wrong? But I don't think politicians are doing that.
Our legal system is not politically elected, but you got to ask yourself, what are they doing as well, right? They have autonomy. Once they're a judge, they can do what they want. They don't have a political master that tells them how to rule things. And yet we have a justice system that continually caters to the failings of our immigration system. People getting off on literal murder charges because it might compromise their ability to get Canadian citizenship. What the hell? Why do we want somebody who's killing others or raping others to become a Canadian? It's ridiculous.
And clearly we've seen it south of the border as well as north of the border, that they're making decisions not based on law, but based on influences, based on political pressure, based on their preconceived notions. Now, I don't know what the answer is. Judges, the judiciary are human, and they come with all the frailties and all the vices that we have and all the strengths and weaknesses we have. So I don't know how you fix it. But you're right, the justice system is broken. There's not equal justice.
No, it's because you hear it now. You start hearing two-tier system, and you starting to see it. Look, your demonstrators downtown, right? How come certain people get treated one way when they protest, and others get treated another when they protest? Same protest, they're fighting the same cause. They have the same freedoms, and yet one will be allowed to do certain things. The other one gets shut down or arrested. Why the double
You know,
standard?
I was talking to some police friends and about the protest activity downtown since October 7th, especially. I was talking about why aren't the police doing their job? And most police officers are fine people and they're in the business for the right reason. And I have a lot of guys that I respect are saying, but you don't understand, it's really tough. We're there to keep the peace. We don't want to be seen as supporting one side over another side. And I said, but you're missing the point. He says, how are we missing the point? I said, no one is asking you to support one side or the other. So what we're asking you to do is enforce the law.
Enforce the law.
And it doesn't matter who breaks the law.
Yeah.
Enforce the law. And if you look at the March for Israel this past weekend, if it's a Jewish person who breaks the law, throw the book at them.
Yeah.
If it's a anti-Jewish person, if it's a Muslim or pro-Hamas person, throw the book at them. So no one is asking for special treatment. It's just that we're, as Canadians, we want to be impartial. Be impartial. Just enforce the friggin' law. We don't do that.
Yeah. And then that will inevitably lead to what we saw in the UK this weekend, which is causing all kinds of problems. And I got to say, you don't see any of it on Canadian media. I haven't seen any of it on Canadian media. You tell me the CBC's covered the stabbing of that poor kid he was stabbed and arrested because apparently he was being racially hateful towards the guy who actually stabbed him. Because the police went in there with this preconceived notion or this training now that basically sets up that situation to happen. They went in there looking for a racially motivated crime to be in progress. Somebody got stabbed and died because of it, was arrested, put in cuffs, while the police were too busy worrying about the racial offensiveness of the allegations when the guy who they're accusing was dying of the stab wounds.
Police officers have a tough job, okay? And most people that go into policing go into it for the right reason. But I tell you, we are so politically correct. We are so scared to offend someone. And it seems to be so simple, really, especially in jobs like policing or being an NHL referee. Just enforce the rules.
Yeah.
That is how you show impartiality. But we can't do that. We don't do that. And unfortunately, senior leaders in organizations, police organizations, in the NHL, in FIFA, okay, they have all these political things that are important to them that the people that actually do the work are conflicted. They can't do the work. They don't feel supported.
They gave the president the Peace Prize, if you remember, and 2 months later he's at war. So it just shows you how virtuous they are and how empty those promises are. They're such pontificating arrogance. I think we're starting to see, like through our discussions, we already touched on justice system, politics. And so the reality is that when we talk about a broken immigration system, it's not just about who are we letting into this country and we got to pay for all that stuff. But look at the implications it has for the country, right? And we are talking, let's be clear, we're talking about the minority, right? If you talk to people in those communities, I live in Brampton. We know which big communities are in Brampton. We have a lot of friends in that community. They are the first ones to tell you, enforce the goddamn law. Get these assholes out of this country because they're making it bad for the rest of us.
You bring up a really good point because, there's a lot of racialization. There's a lot of stereotyping that's going to minority communities, but they are just the tip of the needle. Yep. It's a small group of people that are doing the majority of the damage in this country. And I don't understand how we can't get a handle on it.
Now that you're talking about it, it also reminds me, you brought up the point at the start that your family is immigrants, my family's immigrants, but they also went through the same bullshit, okay? The Italians had the mob. Those guys were let in. They took over. They used and abused the community, just like the Jews had their own people using and abusing their community. But somehow we worked our way through that. So what's changed? Why can't we clean this garbage out so that the legitimate people who are coming over can live the life that they're looking for?
I think what changed are the guardrails. I think there were certain things you couldn't get away with years ago. And there's always been hate. There's always been bad guys, okay? But it was kept below, it was simmering. It was below the horizon. Right now, everything goes. Everything's okay. But when I got involved in public safety and policing a million years ago, If you would spit at a cop, if you would strike a cop,
think about it.
you'd be living for the rest of your life and not know happening. It just didn't happen. There are no filters right now, and there are no guardrails. So that's how these things happen. If you look at the pro-Palestine movement since October 7th, the pro-Palestine, the majority of people that are supportive of that movement are doing it for the right reasons, but it's a small minority that has hijacked that. They're the ones that get all the attention. This is not a Muslim problem, okay? This is not a mobster problem. This is a bad guy problem, whether they're Jewish or Catholic, they're Muslim. And until we accept that and start dealing with it and stop being politically correct, doing the right thing, go back to the basics, okay? We're not going to win. And the longer this goes on, the harder it is to turn around, okay? So if I have pure Irish whiskey and I water it down, okay, I can get away with it for a while. But once there's too much water in there, it's no longer Irish whiskey. This is what we face, and this is what we see is happening in Western Europe.
I'm going to leave it there. I think that's a good place to stop and pause. We hope to come back with a part 2 in a week to continue.
I was going to ask you in the studio, because you're in their Western studio and I'm in our Eastern studio, if there was an earthquake, because with all the moving and shaking I was seeing going on. But
this is what it is to be Italian heritage. We move, we talk with our hands, and that's what it is. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're still both Canadians having a discussion, a free discussion over the internet, and we're going to share with anybody who wants to listen, because that's the country we live in, and that's the one I want to stay in.
I agree, and I think that's what makes this country great. I think the multicultural nature of this country, the immigrants that have built this country is what made Canada great, and we have to fight to keep it. I think next week, second part, what we're going to try and do is this week, wanted to talk a little bit about the problem, and we just touched on the surface. But I think what we're going to try and do is line up a guest for next week and talk about what's broken. How did it break? Where is the system broken down?
Yep, absolutely. And that'll be an interesting discussion, because I'm interested to see who you're going to rope in to come in for that third episode. But that's in your hands, buddy. So if you don't show up,
we're trying to line up some guests from the national security environment that can talk about what's happening. I think you'll be surprised. I don't think there's been a breakdown in the vetting process. I think it's down to political interference. But you know what? Let's hear it from the experts, enough for me.
Willful blindness. That's what we'll be talking about.
Willful blindness. That's right.
All right, folks. I think that wraps it up for this week. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Before you wrap it up, tell people, just tell people where they can
find us on YouTube. Have Redacted Opinions. So we've got a channel started dedicated to the video. So if you want to see Brian's lovely face, you're welcome to watch us on that. Or we're based out of Spotify, but they will share that with all other major listening platforms for podcasts. So we are slowly but surely expanding our tentacles and our network into other social media. But those are the two core ones we're focusing on right now as we try to build it. And with that, we'd appreciate any help that our listeners can offer in terms of liking our podcast. It helps with the algorithm and helps people spread the news. So with that, I'm signing off. We'll talk to you in a week.
See you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Redacted Opinions. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed our podcast to help build our audience. Tune in next week for another episode of Redacted Opinions.